You think you're weak. That's the story you've been telling yourself, quietly, repeatedly, every time you stop halfway, every time you hesitate, every time you walk away from something that demanded more than you were willing to give. You lie there at night, the cold blue glow of your phone lighting up your face, thumb scrolling without purpose, telling yourself you deserve this break, that you've had a long day, that tomorrow will be different. But it won't. Not because you can't change, because you won't. You call it exhaustion, but it's not the kind that comes from giving everything you have. It's the kind that comes from avoiding what matters. The kind that builds up when you know exactly what you should be doing, and you choose not to do it. You tell yourself you're tired, but you still have enough energy to scroll, to watch, to distract, to escape. You're not out of strength. You're out of willingness. And deep down, you know it. There's a moment, right before you quit, when everything becomes clear. When the weight gets heavier, when the resistance kicks in, when your mind starts whispering, "This is enough, you've done enough, you can stop now." That moment is where everything is decided. Not in the hours you plan, not in the motivation you feel at the start, not in the promises you make to yourself when you're comfortable. It's decided right there in that small, quiet moment when continuing feels harder than stopping. And you stop, not because you're incapable, not because you lack talent, not because you weren't meant for it. You stop because it became uncomfortable, because it stopped being easy, because it demanded something real from you: effort, discipline, persistence, and you weren't ready to give it. So you step back. You close the laptop before the work is done. You rack the weights before the set is finished. You walk away just as things start to get hard, and then you tell yourself a story to protect your ego. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm just not that kind of person. Maybe I'm not strong enough. But that's not the truth. The truth is simpler and harsher. You are not weak. You are comfortable. You have trained yourself day after day to avoid discomfort, to choose what feels good now instead of what builds you later, to reward yourself before you've earned it. To escape the moment, something requires more than you're used to giving. And every time you do it, you reinforce the same pattern. You teach your mind that quitting is acceptable, that stopping is normal, that effort has a limit, and you've already reached it. But you haven't. You're nowhere near your limit. You just reached the edge of your comfort and turned back. Look at your habits. Not what you say you want, not what you plan to do. Look at what you actually do when no one is watching. When it's late, when it's quiet, when there's no pressure, no audience, no expectations. That's who you are. Not the version of you that talks about goals, not the version that dreams about success, not the version that promises change starting tomorrow. The real you is revealed in those moments. And in those moments, you choose easy. You choose to delay, to postpone, to soften the edges of your responsibilities. To tell yourself that one more break won't matter, that one missed day is nothing, that you'll make up for it later. But later never comes. Because the same version of you that chose comfort today will be the one making decisions tomorrow. And it will choose the same again. This isn't about motivation. Motivation is fleeting. It shows up when things are new, when things are exciting, when the path ahead looks clear and achievable. But the moment reality sets in, the moment things slow down, become repetitive, demanding, uncertain, motivation disappears. And what's left is you, just you, and your ability to continue without it. That's where most people fail. Not at the beginning, not because they didn't have potential, but because they relied on a feeling that was never meant to last. And when it faded, they had nothing to replace it with. No discipline, no structure, no standard they refused to fall below. Just excuses, dressed up as reasons. And that's exactly where you are. You're not stuck. You're not lost. You're not broken. You're undisciplined. You've allowed yourself to negotiate with your own goals, to treat your commitments like suggestions instead of rules, to walk away the moment it stops feeling good. And every time you do, you lose a little more control over yourself. Not in a dramatic way, not all at once, but slowly, quietly, consistently, until one day, you look at your life and wonder why nothing has changed. But it has. You just didn't notice it happening in the wrong direction. Every time you chose comfort over effort, you moved backward. Every time you avoided difficulty, you became a little weaker. Not physically, not even mentally in the way you might think, but in your standard, in your tolerance for discomfort, in your ability to endure what's necessary. You lowered the bar, again and again, until now, even the smallest challenge feels overwhelming. And instead of raising yourself back up, you label it as weakness. You convince yourself that you're just not built for more, that others have something you don't, that they're stronger, more driven, more capable. But they're not. They just don't stop where you stop. They reach that same moment, the same resistance, the same discomfort, the same voice telling them to quit, and they keep going. Not because they enjoy it, not because it's easy, but because they've trained themselves to move forward anyway. That's the difference. It's not talent, it's not luck, it's not some hidden advantage you don't have access to. It's a decision you avoid making every single day. Because making it would mean letting go of the comfort you've grown used to. It would mean facing the fact that you've been holding yourself back, that the life you want is on the other side of actions you've been unwilling to take, that the gap between where you are and where you could be is built entirely on your choices. And that's a hard truth to accept. It's easier to believe you're weak, easier to believe you're limited, easier to believe that something is missing inside you. Because if that were true, then it wouldn't be your fault. Then you wouldn't have to change. Then you wouldn't have to do the hard things you've been avoiding. But it's not true. Nothing is missing. You are capable of more than you've ever allowed yourself to prove. You just haven't stayed long enough in the discomfort to see it. You haven't pushed far enough past the point where it starts to hurt. You haven't continued when everything inside you tells you to stop. Not yet. So don't call yourself weak. Call it what it is. You've been choosing the easier path. You've been protecting your comfort. You've been giving yourself permission to quit, and that ends the moment you decide it does. Because the truth, the one you keep avoiding, is this. It's not that you can't do it. It's that you refuse to do it when it becomes difficult. You tell yourself you're tired. That's always the first excuse. The most believable one, the one that slips out so naturally, you don't even question it anymore. I'm tired. You say it after a few minutes of real effort. You say it when the task starts to feel heavy. You say it the moment your focus begins to slip, the moment your mind looks for a way out. And the dangerous part is, you believe it. But pause for a second and look at the pattern. You're tired when it's time to work, but somehow not tired enough to scroll for another hour. You're exhausted when it's time to train, but not exhausted enough to sit, watch, consume, distract yourself with things that require nothing from you. Your energy doesn't disappear. It just shifts to whatever is easier. So is it really exhaustion, or is it avoidance dressed up as fatigue? There's a difference between being physically drained and being mentally uncomfortable. Real fatigue is heavy. It slows your body down. It makes even simple movements difficult. It forces you to rest because there's nothing left to give. But what you feel most of the time isn't that. What you feel is resistance. A kind of tension in your mind that appears the moment something requires focus, effort, or discipline. It's subtle at first, a small voice, a slight discomfort, a whisper that says you can stop now, you've done enough, you can come back to this later. And because it doesn't feel like weakness, because it feels like reason, you listen. You step away, you take a break, you delay, and then you label it as being tired. But the truth is, you weren't tired. You were uncomfortable, and you've trained yourself to escape that feeling as quickly as possible. Think about the last time you were fully engaged in something easy, watching videos, playing a game, talking about things that don't demand anything from you. Did you feel tired then? Probably not. You could go for hours without even noticing the time. Your energy didn't suddenly disappear. Your mind didn't shut down because there was no resistance, no pressure, no demand for growth. Now compare that to the moment you sit down to do something difficult, something that matters, something that pushes you. Within minutes, your mind starts looking for exits. You check your phone, you adjust your position, you convince yourself you need a break. And if you stay just a little longer, that feeling intensifies. The urge to stop becomes louder, more convincing, more urgent. That's not exhaustion. That's your brain trying to protect you from discomfort, and you keep giving in to it. You've blurred the line between being truly tired and simply not wanting to continue. And because you don't recognize the difference, you treat every moment of resistance as a signal to stop. You obey it. You respect it. You build your decisions around it. And slowly that habit shapes your entire life. Because the moments that matter most are never easy. They are never comfortable. They never come with a sense of calm and readiness. They come with friction, with doubt, with pressure. They come with that exact feeling you keep avoiding. And every time you walk away from it, you reinforce the same pattern. You teach yourself that discomfort means stop. You teach yourself that effort has a limit. You teach yourself that the moment it gets hard, you're done. But you're not. You're just at the beginning of the real work. There's a point in everything you do where the easy part ends and the meaningful part begins. The first few minutes of effort are always manageable. You're still fresh. Your mind is still cooperating. But then something shifts. The task becomes heavier. Your focus weakens. The excitement fades. And now you're left with nothing but discipline. That's where you label yourself as tired. That's where you step back. That's where you quit. Not because you can't continue, but because continuing requires more than you're used to giving. You haven't reached your limit. You've reached your comfort boundary. And instead of pushing past it, you turn it into an excuse. You say you need rest. You say you'll come back later. You say you'll do better tomorrow, but tomorrow arrives with the same version of you, the same habits, the same mindset, the same instinct to avoid discomfort. And so the cycle repeats. You start, you feel resistance, you stop, you justify it, you repeat. And over time, this becomes your identity. Someone who begins but doesn't finish. Someone who tries but doesn't persist. Someone who confuses discomfort with inability. But the truth is still there underneath all of it. You are not exhausted. You are avoiding the part where it gets real. Avoiding the part where growth actually happens. Avoiding the version of yourself that exists on the other side of sustained effort. Because that version requires something you haven't committed to yet. Consistency. Not motivation, not bursts of energy, not moments of inspiration, but the quiet, repetitive act of continuing even when nothing inside you wants to. That's the line you keep stepping away from. And until you face it, nothing changes. You will continue to call it tiredness. You will continue to give yourself permission to stop. You will continue to believe that something is wrong with you, when in reality, the only thing missing is your willingness to stay in the discomfort a little longer. Because if you stayed just 5 minutes more, just one set more, just one task further, you would start to see something different. You would realize that the feeling you were trying to escape doesn't kill you, it doesn't break you, it passes. And on the other side of it, there's progress, but you never stay long enough to reach that point. You leave too early, every time. So understand this clearly. That feeling you call tired is not always your body asking for rest. Most of the time, it's your mind asking for relief. And relief is easy to give. It requires nothing, it costs nothing, but it keeps you exactly where you are. Growth, on the other hand, demands that you resist that urge, that you question it, that you stay when everything inside you is telling you to leave. And that's the decision you keep avoiding. Because it's uncomfortable, because it's hard, because it forces you to confront the truth that you had more in you and you chose not to use it. So the next time you say you're tired, stop for a moment. Don't move. Don't reach for your phone. Don't step away. Just sit with that feeling and ask yourself one question. Am I truly exhausted, or do I just not want to continue? And be honest, because your answer will define everything that comes after. You don't need more energy. You don't need more time. You don't need a different situation. You need to stop lying to yourself. You need to recognize the difference between real fatigue and simple avoidance. And once you see it clearly, you lose the ability to hide behind it. You lose the excuse. You lose the comfort of pretending. And what's left is a choice. A simple, uncomfortable, unavoidable choice. Continue or stop. And if you choose to stop, at least be honest about why. Because it's not that you're tired, it's that you were looking for a reason to quit. Your brain is not your enemy, but it is not your ally either. It doesn't care about your goals, your ambitions, or the version of yourself you say you want to become. It cares about efficiency. It cares about survival. And most importantly, it cares about reward. Immediate reward. Fast reward, easy reward. That's why, without even realizing it, you keep choosing the easiest path available. You wake up and reach for your phone. Not because you need to, but because your brain already knows what's waiting. Quick stimulation, endless novelty. A constant stream of content designed to keep you engaged without asking anything in return. You scroll, you tap, you swipe, and every few seconds, your brain gets a small hit of dopamine. A reward. A signal that says, this feels good, do it again. And you do, again and again, until it becomes automatic. You don't think about it anymore. You don't question it. It's just what you do. A habit so deeply wired that it feels natural, almost necessary. And while you're doing it, everything else, the things that actually matter, start to feel heavier, slower, harder to engage with. Because they don't give you that same immediate reward. They don't give you that instant feedback, that quick satisfaction, that effortless sense of progress. They require time, effort, focus. They require you to sit in discomfort without being rewarded right away, and your brain hates that. So it resists, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to push you towards something easier. You tell yourself you'll start working, but first, just a few minutes on your phone. You tell yourself you'll focus, but then you check one notification, then another, then another. You sit down to do something important, and suddenly everything else feels more appealing. Cleaning your room, watching a video, replying to messages that didn't need an immediate response. Anything but the hard thing. Because your brain has been trained by you to expect easy rewards. And now anything that doesn't deliver them feels like a burden. This is the loop you're stuck in. Avoid difficulty, choose comfort, get rewarded, repeat. Over and over. Every time you choose the easier option, you reinforce the same pattern. You strengthen the pathway in your mind that says, when things get hard, find something easier. And the more you repeat it, the stronger it becomes. Until eventually, it's no longer a choice. It's a reflex. You don't decide to avoid difficulty. You automatically do it. And then you wonder why you can't stay consistent, why you can't focus, why everything that matters feels so much harder than it should. It's not because you're incapable. It's because you've conditioned yourself to expect ease. You've taught your brain that effort is optional, that discomfort is unnecessary, that there's always a way out. And now, when you try to do something that requires real discipline, your mind pushes back. It floods you with distractions. It makes the task feel overwhelming. It convinces you to delay, to postpone, to come back later. Not because you can't handle it, but because you're not used to it. You've become addicted, not to failure, not to laziness, but to comfort. To the feeling of things being easy, to the absence of resistance, to the constant flow of low-effort rewards that require nothing from you. And like any addiction, it changes your tolerance. What used to feel manageable now feels difficult. What used to require focus now feels exhausting. What used to be normal effort now feels like too much, because your baseline has shifted. You're no longer operating from a place of discipline. You're operating from a place of convenience. And convenience doesn't build anything. It maintains, it preserves, it keeps you exactly where you are. But you don't notice it happening. Because it feels good, because it's easy, because there's no immediate consequence. You don't feel the damage in the moment you choose comfort. You feel relief. You feel relaxed. You feel like you've earned a break, even when you haven't. And that feeling reinforces the behavior. It tells your brain this is the right choice. Do it again next time. So you do. And each time, the gap between what you could be doing and what you actually do gets wider. Not because you lack ambition, not because you lack ability, but because you've trained yourself to follow the path of least resistance. And that path never leads anywhere meaningful. It leads to stagnation. It leads to frustration. It leads to that quiet, persistent feeling that you're capable of more, but you're not living up to it. And deep down, you know why. Because when the moment comes to choose, when it's time to do the hard thing, you hesitate. You look for an alternative. You negotiate. You delay. And eventually, you choose the easier option. Not once, not occasionally, but consistently. That's what defines you. Not your intentions, not your plans, not your potential, your choices. Repeat it over time, and right now, your choices are built around comfort. You don't need more motivation. You don't need a better system. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment. You need to break the pattern. You need to recognize what's happening in real time. The pull toward ease, the urge to escape, the habit of choosing what feels good instead of what moves you forward. You need to see it clearly enough that you can interrupt it. Because until you do, nothing changes. You will continue to chase short-term rewards at the expense of long-term growth. You will continue to feel busy without being productive. You will continue to mistake stimulation for progress. And you will continue to believe that something is wrong with you, when in reality, you've just been reinforcing the wrong behaviors. Your brain isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it's been trained to do. The question is, are you going to keep training it the same way? Or are you finally going to force it to adapt? Because the moment you start choosing difficulty, intentionally, consistently, without negotiation, you begin to reverse the process. You begin to rewire your responses. You teach your brain that discomfort is not a threat, that effort is not something to avoid, that rewards don't have to be immediate to be worth pursuing. And at first, it will feel wrong. It will feel harder than it should. It will feel like you're fighting yourself. Because you are. You're breaking a pattern that you've reinforced for years. But that's the cost. That's the price of becoming someone who can do what others won't. Someone who doesn't default to ease. Someone who doesn't need constant stimulation to function. Someone who can sit in discomfort and continue anyway. That's the version of you that you keep talking about. The disciplined version. The focused version. The one who actually follows through. But you don't become that person by waiting for motivation. You become that person by rejecting the easy option again and again until it's no longer your default. Until effort becomes normal. Until discomfort becomes familiar. Until the things that used to feel hard become part of who you are. And it starts with a simple truth you can't ignore anymore. You are not weak. You are addicted to ease. And until you break that addiction, you will keep choosing the same path. The easier one, the safer one, the one that keeps you exactly where you are. You say you don't have time. That's the excuse that sounds the most reasonable, the most acceptable, the one no one questions, including you. I'm busy. I'll do it later. There's just too much going on right now. It feels true. It feels justified. It feels like a fact, but it isn't. Because if you really didn't have time, you wouldn't be able to waste it so easily. Look at your day. Honestly, not the version you tell yourself, but the version that actually happens. The small moments that add up. The minutes that turn into hours without you noticing. The times you open your phone just for a second and suddenly it's been 30 minutes. The times you delay starting because you're not ready, so you scroll, watch, consume, wait for the right mood that never comes. You don't lack time, you lose it. And you lose it in ways that feel harmless in the moment. Nothing you do seems big enough to matter. A few minutes here, a short break there, a quick distraction before you begin. But those fragments don't disappear. They accumulate, quietly, consistently, until the day ends and you're left wondering where it all went. And then you say you were busy. But busy doing what? Not the things that move your life forward. Not the things you say are important. Not the work that actually changes anything. You were busy staying comfortable. Busy avoiding effort. Busy filling your time with things that demand nothing from you. And that's the part you don't want to admit. Because admitting it means accepting responsibility. It means realizing that the gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't caused by a lack of time. It's caused by how you choose to spend it. You have the same 24 hours as everyone else. That's not a motivational quote. That's a fact you can't escape. And within those hours, there are moments, more than enough moments, where you could do something meaningful. Something difficult, something that pushes you forward. But when those moments appear, you hesitate, you delay, you tell yourself you'll start later, and later becomes never. This is what procrastination really is. It's not laziness in the obvious sense. It's not doing nothing. It's doing everything except the one thing that matters. It's staying occupied while avoiding progress. It's convincing yourself that you're being productive because you're doing something, even if that something has no real impact. You clean instead of creating. You plan instead of executing. You think instead of acting. You prepare endlessly, but you never begin. And every time you do this, you feel a strange kind of relief. A sense that you're still moving, still engaged, still on track. But deep down, you know the truth. You know you're avoiding the real work, the uncomfortable work, the work that doesn't give you instant feedback or immediate satisfaction. So you keep pushing it away, not because you don't have time, but because you don't want to face it. There's always a moment before you start something important, a moment where everything is clear. You know exactly what needs to be done. You know how to begin. You know that if you just take the first step, momentum will follow. But instead of stepping forward, you pause. You look for something else to do first. Something easier, something lighter, something that doesn't require your full attention, and you tell yourself it's just temporary. I'll get to it after this. But you don't. Because once you've chosen the easier path, your brain doesn't want to go back. It's already been rewarded. It's already settled into comfort. And now switching to something difficult feels even harder than it did before. So you delay again and again, until the time you thought you didn't have is gone. This is how you lose control of your life. Not through big mistakes, not through dramatic failures, but through small, repeated decisions to avoid what matters. Decisions that feel insignificant in the moment, but shape your entire direction over time. You're not overwhelmed, you're misaligned. Your actions don't match your priorities. You say something is important, but your behavior says otherwise. You say you want change, but you don't give it your time. You say you don't have enough hours in the day, but you spend those hours on things that don't deserve them. And the result is predictable. Nothing moves, nothing improves, nothing changes. Because the things that could change your life are always pushed to later. But later is a lie. Later is where you send the things you don't want to do. Later is where your goals go to die. Because the version of you who exists later is the same version of you who exists now. The same habits, the same mindset, the same tendency to avoid discomfort. You don't suddenly become more disciplined in the future. You don't magically find more time. You don't wake up one day with a completely different set of priorities. You carry your patterns with you. So if you avoid now, you will avoid later. If you delay now, you will delay later. If you choose comfort now, you will choose comfort later. That's the cycle you're stuck in. And the only way out is to see it for what it is. You are not busy, you are avoiding. You are filling your time with noise so you don't have to face the silence where real work begins. You are choosing distraction over direction. You are trading progress for temporary comfort over and over again until it becomes your default behavior. And then you wonder why nothing changes. But it's not complicated. You don't need more time. You need to use the time you already have differently. You need to stop treating your priorities like optional tasks that can be moved around, delayed, replaced, or ignored. You need to stop negotiating with yourself every time something feels difficult. You need to decide clearly and without compromise what matters, and then act accordingly. Because time doesn't disappear. You give it away. You give it to distractions. You give it to habits that don't serve you. You give it to comfort. And every time you do, you move further away from the life you say you want. So the next time you catch yourself saying, I don't have time, stop. Look at your day. Look at your choices. Look at where your hours actually go. And ask yourself the question you've been avoiding. Is it really that you don't have time, or is it that you're not willing to spend it on what matters? Because the answer is already there. And once you see it clearly, you can't hide behind the excuse anymore. You don't need more hours. You need better priorities. You need to stop wasting what you already have. You need to stop lying to yourself. Because the truth, the one that cuts through every excuse, every delay, every justification, is simple. You are not busy. You are choosing the wrong things. You keep waiting to feel ready. Waiting for that moment when everything aligns. Your mood, your energy, your focus. When the work suddenly feels easier, when the resistance disappears, when you finally feel motivated. You tell yourself that when that feeling comes, you'll start. You'll go all in. You'll be consistent. You'll become the version of yourself you keep imagining. But that moment doesn't come. Or if it does, it doesn't stay. Because motivation was never designed to last. It's a spark, a short burst of energy, a temporary surge that shows up when something is new, when something excites you, when the idea of change feels fresh and possible. It makes you believe you can do anything. It makes the hard things feel manageable for a while, and then it fades, always. Not because something went wrong, not because you lost your potential, but because that's its nature. Motivation is unstable. It rises and falls depending on your mood, your environment, your sleep, your stress, your emotions. It's unpredictable, it's unreliable, and yet you've built your entire system around it. You wait for it to show up before you act, and when it disappears, you stop. That's the cycle. You feel inspired, you start strong, you rely on that feeling, it fades, you slow down, you stop, you wait for it to come back. And while you're waiting, nothing happens. Days pass, weeks pass, opportunities pass, and you stay exactly where you are. Not because you lack ability, but because you depend on a feeling that you cannot control. Look at your past. Every time you started something new, you had motivation. You felt it, that initial drive, that excitement, that belief that this time will be different. You made plans, you set goals, you told yourself you would stay consistent. And for a few days, maybe a few weeks, you did. But then something changed. The work became repetitive. The progress slowed down, the excitement faded, and suddenly it felt harder to continue. Not because the task itself became impossible, but because the feeling that made it easy was gone. And without that feeling, you didn't know how to proceed. So you stopped, and you told yourself you just needed to find your motivation again. But that's the mistake. You don't need more motivation. You need something that works when motivation doesn't. You need discipline, because discipline doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't depend on your mood. It doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It doesn't ask whether you're inspired or tired or stressed or distracted. It simply demands action, again and again and again. Discipline is the decision to continue without emotion, to act even when you don't feel like it, to follow through on your commitments, regardless of how uncomfortable, boring, or difficult they become. And that's exactly what you've been avoiding. Because discipline is hard. It requires consistency without reward, effort without immediate payoff, repetition without excitement. It forces you to show up on the days when everything inside you says not to. And that's the difference. Motivation makes starting easy. Discipline makes continuing possible. Without discipline, you will always be at the mercy of your feelings. You will only act when it's convenient, when it feels good, when it aligns with your emotions. And because your emotions change constantly, your actions will too. You will be inconsistent, unpredictable, unreliable, not to others, but to yourself. You will break your own promises over and over again. You'll say you'll start tomorrow. You'll say you'll do it later. You'll say you just need to feel ready. And each time, you push the responsibility further away. Because it's easier to wait for motivation than to build discipline. Waiting requires nothing. Discipline requires everything. It requires you to confront the truth that you don't need to feel good to do what needs to be done. That your emotions are not commands. That discomfort is not a signal to stop. That boredom is not a reason to quit. It requires you to act in spite of all of it. And that's where most people fail. Not because they can't be disciplined, but because they've never trained themselves to be. They've spent years responding to how they feel, years following the path of least resistance, years avoiding discomfort whenever possible. And now, when they try to rely on discipline, it feels unnatural. It feels forced. It feels wrong. Because it goes against everything they've practiced. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. It means it's unfamiliar. And anything unfamiliar feels difficult at first. You're not supposed to enjoy discipline in the beginning. You're not supposed to feel motivated every time you act. You're not supposed to love the process. You're supposed to do it anyway. That's the point. Because over time, something changes. The more you act without relying on motivation, the less you need it. The more you follow through, regardless of how you feel, the stronger your ability to do so becomes. The more you remove emotion from your decisions, the more consistent you become. And consistency is what creates results. Not bursts of effort, not moments of inspiration, not temporary motivation. Consistency. Doing the work when it's easy. Doing the work when it's hard. Doing the work when you don't feel like it. Doing the work when no one is watching. Doing the work when there is no reward in sight. That's what builds something real. That's what moves you forward. That's what separates the people who talk about change from the people who actually achieve it. Because the ones who succeed are not more motivated than you. They are more disciplined. They don't wait to feel ready. They act anyway. They don't depend on inspiration. They build structure. They don't ask themselves whether they want to do it. They decide that they will. And then they follow through. Every day. Regardless. That's the standard you've been avoiding. Because it removes your excuses. It removes your ability to negotiate. It removes the comfort of saying, I just don't feel like it today. Because discipline doesn't care. And once you adopt it, neither do you. You stop asking how you feel. You start asking what needs to be done. And then you do it. No hesitation, no delay, no negotiation. That's what you're missing. Not motivation, not potential, not time. Discipline. And until you build it, you will keep repeating the same cycle. Starting strong, fading quickly, stopping completely, waiting to start again, over and over. But once you break that cycle, once you decide that action is no longer dependent on how you feel, you become something different. Someone reliable, someone consistent, someone who finishes what they start, someone who doesn't need to be pushed by emotion, someone who moves forward regardless. And that's when things change. Not overnight, not instantly, but steadily, permanently. Because you're no longer relying on something that comes and goes. You're relying on something you control, and that's the shift, the one you've been avoiding, the one that demands more from you, the one that forces you to grow. So stop waiting to feel motivated. Stop telling yourself you'll start when you're ready. Stop believing that you need the right mood to take action. Because if you need to feel inspired to begin, you will never stay long enough to finish. And that's the truth you can't ignore anymore. If you need motivation to act, you will never act long enough to matter. You tell yourself you're not good enough. That's the line you repeat when things don't go your way, when progress feels slow, when results don't match your expectations. Maybe I'm just not built for this. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I don't have what it takes. It sounds honest. It sounds self-aware. It even sounds humble. But it isn't. It's protection. It's a way to soften the impact of quitting. A way to walk away without feeling like you failed. Because if you convince yourself that you were never capable in the first place, then stopping doesn't feel like giving up. It feels like acceptance. It feels like clarity. It feels like you're being realistic. But you're not. You're retreating. You're creating a story that justifies your exit. And the more you repeat that story, the more real it becomes. I'm not good enough. I'm not talented. I'm not like them. You say it enough times, and eventually you stop questioning it. You stop challenging it. You stop testing it. You accept it as fact. And once you accept it, your behavior changes to match it. You stop trying as hard. You stop pushing yourself. You stop taking risks. You stay within the boundaries of what feels safe, what feels manageable, what doesn't expose you to failure. And from the outside, it looks like you've simply chosen a different path. But in reality, you've limited yourself. You've lowered your standard to match your belief. And that belief was never proven. It was just repeated. This is what self-pity really is. It's not always obvious. It doesn't always look like sadness or weakness. Sometimes it looks like logic, like self-awareness, like knowing your limits. But underneath all of that, it serves the same purpose. It gives you permission to stop. It tells you you've done enough. This isn't your path. You tried, and that's what matters. And in that moment, it feels comforting. It feels like relief. Because continuing would require you to face something harder. The possibility that you could improve, that you could get better, that you could succeed if you didn't quit. And that possibility is dangerous. Because if it's true, then your current situation isn't fixed. It's chosen. And that's a responsibility most people don't want to carry. It's easier to believe that you lack something, that there's a gap you can't close, that others have an advantage you don't. Because if that's the case, then you're not accountable for the outcome. You can step back, accept your place, and move on without questioning yourself too deeply. But that's not the truth. The truth is, you haven't stayed long enough to find out what you're capable of. You haven't failed because you're not good enough. You've stopped before you had the chance to become good enough. There's a difference, and you keep ignoring it. Every skill, every ability, every level of mastery starts at the same place. Being bad at it. being uncomfortable, being slow, making mistakes, feeling like you don't belong. That's not a sign that you're not meant for it. That's the process. That's how it works. But you don't allow yourself to go through it. You try, you struggle, you feel resistance, and then you interpret that resistance as a signal that something is wrong with you, that you're not suited for this, that you should stop before you waste more time. And so you do. You step away, you label it as self-awareness, and you move on to something else, only to repeat the same pattern again. Because the problem isn't the activity, it's your response to difficulty. You've conditioned yourself to interpret struggle as inadequacy, to see discomfort as a sign of weakness, to believe that if something doesn't come naturally, it's not for you. And that belief keeps you stuck, because it removes the one thing you need most, persistence. Instead of pushing through the hard phase, you retreat. Instead of building skill over time, you abandon the process early. Instead of developing confidence through action, you destroy it through avoidance. And then you reinforce the same narrative. I'm just not good enough. But you never gave yourself the chance to be. You never stayed long enough. You never endured the part where growth actually happens. You protected yourself from failure so well that you also protected yourself from success. That's the cost of self-pity. It feels safe in the moment, but it keeps you small over time. It convinces you to lower your expectations, to aim for less, to settle for what feels achievable instead of what's possible. It wraps your limitations in language that sounds reasonable, so you don't have to confront them directly. But they're still there, and they're still yours. You're not being honest with yourself. You're being lenient. You're giving yourself an easy way out. Every time you say, I'm not good enough, ask yourself what you really mean. Do you mean you've reached your absolute limit? Do you mean you've given everything you have for long enough, with full effort and consistency, and still found no progress? Or do you mean it got difficult and you stopped? Because those are not the same thing. Not even close. One is a conclusion, the other is an excuse, and you keep confusing the two. You don't lack ability, you lack endurance, you lack the willingness to stay in the process long enough for ability to develop, and instead of addressing that, you choose to believe that the ability was never there. Because that belief is easier to carry. But it's also false. You are far more capable than you've proven. Not because of some abstract potential, but because you haven't exhausted your effort. You haven't reached the point where your limits are truly tested. You've stopped before that point over and over again, and then used that early exit as evidence of your limitations. That's not proof. That's avoidance. And it's costing you more than you realize. Every time you allow yourself to believe you're not good enough, you weaken your own standard. You lower your expectations. You reduce the level of effort you're willing to give. You create a version of yourself that operates below its actual capacity. Not because it has to, because it's allowed to. And that permission is the real problem. You've been too forgiving with yourself in the moments that matter, too quick to accept defeat, too willing to step back instead of stepping up. You've made it easy to quit, and then you've justified that decision with language that sounds reasonable. But it's not. It's self-sabotage. Quiet, subtle, consistent, and it's time you see it clearly. You don't need to believe you're the best. You don't need to feel confident every step of the way. You don't need to be perfect. But you do need to stop giving yourself permission to give up. You need to stop hiding behind the idea that you're not good enough. You need to stop turning temporary struggle into permanent identity. Because once you do that, you lock yourself in place and nothing changes. So strip it down to the truth. You are not lacking ability. You are lacking commitment. You are not incapable. You are inconsistent. You are not limited. You are stopping too soon. And until you face that, nothing improves. Because the problem isn't what you can't do, it's what you refuse to continue doing. So the next time you hear yourself say, I'm not good enough, don't accept it. Question it, challenge it. Ask yourself whether you've truly earned that conclusion or whether you're just looking for a reason to quit. Because deep down, you already know the answer. You don't lack capability. You've been allowing yourself to stay weak. No one is coming. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when things get harder, not when you feel ready, not when you finally decide you've had enough. There is no moment where someone steps into your life, takes control, and pulls you out of where you are. There is no rescue waiting for you at the bottom of your hesitation, your delay, your excuses. You are on your own. And that's the part you keep trying to ignore because it's uncomfortable to accept. It removes the safety net. It removes the illusion that something external will change your situation. That a better opportunity, a better environment, a better version of yourself will appear and make everything easier. You want to believe that something will shift without you having to change first. But it won't. Life doesn't adjust to your feelings. It doesn't slow down because you're overwhelmed. It doesn't pause because you're unsure. It doesn't care whether you feel ready, motivated, confident, or afraid. It moves forward regardless. Time keeps passing, opportunities keep moving, the world keeps turning, with or without you. And while you hesitate, while you wait, while you convince yourself that you need more time, more clarity, more support, nothing stops. The gap between where you are and where you could be doesn't stay the same. It grows, quietly, relentlessly. Because you're not standing still, you're falling behind. Every day you don't act, someone else does. Every moment you delay, someone else moves forward. Not because they're better, not because they have something you don't, but because they accepted a truth you haven't. That no one is going to do it for them. No one is going to wake them up when they don't feel like getting out of bed. No one is going to push them to work when they'd rather rest. No one is going to carry them through the hard parts, the boring parts, the painful parts. They do it themselves. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. You, on the other hand, keep waiting for something to make it easier. You wait for motivation. You wait for the right time. You wait for a sign. You wait for someone to believe in you enough that you finally believe in yourself. And while you wait, nothing changes. Because nothing will. There is no perfect moment. There is no external force that will come in and fix your habits, your mindset, your discipline. There is no one who will sit you down and force you to become who you need to be. People can advise you, they can guide you, they can support you, but they cannot act for you. They cannot wake up in your place. They cannot focus in your place. They cannot endure discomfort in your place. They cannot build your life for you. That responsibility is yours, completely. And until you accept that fully, without hesitation, you will keep searching for something that doesn't exist. A shortcut, a push, a rescue. But there is none. There is only action, your action, taken consistently without relying on how you feel, because your feelings are irrelevant to the outcome. That's the harsh truth. You can feel tired and still work. You can feel unmotivated and still act. You can feel afraid and still move forward. Or you can choose not to. And nothing will stop you from making that choice. No one will intervene. No one will correct you. No one will step in and say, this is the moment you need to change. Because that moment is always now. And you keep letting it pass. You think you have time. You think you can delay. You think you can afford to wait until things feel different. But every delay is a decision. Every hesitation is a choice. Every time you don't act, you are actively choosing to stay where you are. And over time, that choice becomes your reality. You don't end up stuck by accident. You end up stuck by repetition. By choosing not to move over and over again until not moving becomes your default. And then you look at your life and wonder why it hasn't changed. But it has. You just didn't move with it. This is where the truth becomes unavoidable. You are responsible. Not for everything that happens to you, but for everything you do about it. You don't control your circumstances, but you control your response. You don't control the difficulty, but you control whether you face it. You don't control how you feel, but you control whether you act anyway. And that control is enough, more than enough. But you have to use it, because if you don't, nothing improves. No one will step in and fix your discipline. No one will build your habits for you. No one will carry you through the moments you don't feel like continuing. Those moments belong to you. And how you respond to them defines everything. You either act or you don't. You either move forward or you stay where you are. There is no middle ground, no hidden path, no alternative route, just a decision, repeated daily, sometimes hourly, sometimes minute by minute. And each time, you either take control or you give it up reality. Not the version you want, not the version that feels comfortable. The real one, the one that doesn't care about your excuses, the one that doesn't adjust to your hesitation, the one that keeps moving forward whether you're ready or not. So stop waiting. Stop looking for something outside of yourself to change your situation. Stop believing that someone, somewhere will step in and make it easier. They won't. They can't. And even if they could, it wouldn't matter, because the only change that lasts is the one you create yourself, through action, through consistency, through discipline, through doing what needs to be done when you don't feel like doing it. That's it. No shortcuts, no rescue, no exceptions, just you. And the decision you keep avoiding, to stand up, to take responsibility, to move forward without waiting for permission. Because in the end, it comes down to one truth you can't escape anymore. You either get up and do it yourself, or you stay exactly where you are. You think you're standing still. That as long as you're not making big mistakes, as long as you're not completely falling apart, as long as things look okay on the surface, you're fine. You tell yourself you're just taking a break, just slowing down, just waiting for the right time to start again. But you're not standing still. You're moving, just not in the direction you think. Because in reality, there is no neutral state. There is no pause button where nothing changes. Every day, whether you act or not, something is happening. Your habits are either getting stronger or weaker. Your discipline is either building or fading. Your standards are either rising or lowering. And right now, without realizing it, you're drifting backward. Slowly, quietly, but consistently. Because every time you choose not to act, you reinforce the version of yourself that avoids action. Every time you give in to comfort, you make it easier to do it again. Every time you delay, you weaken your ability to follow through. And those small decisions, insignificant on their own, start to define who you are. Not in one day, not in one moment, but over time. You don't wake up one day and suddenly become weak. You become weak by repetition, by choosing the easier option again and again until it becomes your default, by avoiding difficulty so often that even small challenges feel overwhelming, by lowering your standards just enough, just frequently enough, that you no longer recognize how far you've drifted from where you once were or where you could have been. And the most dangerous part? You don't feel it happening. There's no alarm, no sudden collapse, no clear signal that you're moving in the wrong direction. Because decline is subtle. It hides inside comfort. It feels like rest. It feels like taking it easy. It feels like giving yourself a break. But it's not. It's erosion. It's the slow breakdown of your discipline, your focus, your ability to do hard things. And because it happens gradually, you adapt to it. What once felt like laziness starts to feel normal. What once required effort now feels like too much. What once pushed you forward now feels unnecessary. You adjust your expectations to match your behavior. And that's how you stay stuck. Not because you don't want more, but because you've accepted less. You've convinced yourself that this version of you is enough, that you can stay here a little longer, that you can always push later, that there's no urgency, no pressure, no real consequence to waiting. But there is. You're paying for it every day. Not in obvious ways, but in lost progress, lost momentum, lost potential. Every day you don't act, you lose ground, not just externally, but internally. Your ability to focus gets weaker. Your tolerance for discomfort shrinks. Your discipline fades. And the longer you stay in that state, the harder it becomes to break out of it. Because you're not just standing still, you're becoming someone who stands still. That's the shift. From a temporary phase to a permanent identity. And once that identity sets in, everything becomes harder. Starting feels harder. Continuing feels harder. Believing in yourself feels harder. Because you've built a pattern of inaction that now defines your response to difficulty. You don't push through. You step back. You don't endure. You avoid. You don't grow. You maintain. And maintaining, over time, becomes decline. Because the world around you doesn't stop. Standards rise. Competition increases. Opportunities move. And if you're not actively improving, you're falling behind. There's no exception. No shortcut. No way around it. You either move forward or you move backward. And right now, by choosing comfort, by choosing delay, by choosing ease, you're moving backward. Even if it doesn't feel like it, even if everything looks the same, even if you tell yourself you're fine, you're not. You're just not paying attention. Because if you were, you would see the difference. You would see how your focus has weakened, how your discipline has slipped, how the things you once intended to do have been replaced by things that don't matter. You would see how easy it has become to say later, how natural it feels to avoid, how normal it is to not follow through. And that's the problem. It's become normal. You've normalized a version of yourself that operates below its potential. And now anything above that level feels uncomfortable, unnatural, difficult. But that discomfort is not a sign that you're incapable. It's a sign that you've been underperforming for too long. And the longer you stay there, the more you lose. Not just time, but capability. Because capability is built through action, through repetition, through pushing yourself beyond what feels easy. And when you stop doing that, you don't maintain your level. You drop below it. You lose sharpness. You lose resilience. You lose the edge that comes from consistent effort. And rebuilding it later is always harder than maintaining it now. That's the cost you don't see. The cost of waiting, the cost of delaying, the cost of choosing comfort today and assuming you can fix it tomorrow. Because tomorrow comes with a weaker version of you, a version that has practiced avoidance, a version that has reinforced inaction, a version that now has to fight not just the task, but the habits that are holding it back. And that fight is harder than it needs to be. Because it didn't have to get this far, but it did. Because you let it. Because you kept choosing the easier path. Because you believed you were standing still, but you weren't. You were drifting. And now you're further from where you want to be than you realize. So understand this clearly. Every day matters. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that demands perfection, but in a way that accumulates. Every decision you make is a vote for the person you're becoming. And right now, those votes are building a version of you that avoids, delays, and settles. Unless you change them, unless you interrupt the pattern, unless you decide, consciously, deliberately, to act differently. Because nothing changes on its own. There is no automatic correction, no natural return to discipline, no moment where everything resets and you get back on track without effort. You either correct it, or it continues. You either push forward, or you keep drifting backward. That's it. So stop telling yourself you're fine. Stop pretending you're just paused. Stop believing you can stay here without consequences. Because you can't. You're not standing still. You're becoming something every single day. And right now, without action, without discipline, without intention, you are becoming weaker. That's the truth. The one you keep avoiding. The one that doesn't care how you feel. The one that forces a decision. Because once you see it clearly, you don't get to ignore it anymore. You either change direction or you continue down the same path. And that path leads exactly where it's been taking you all along. So remember this. You are not neutral. You are not paused. You are not waiting. You are moving. And if you're not moving forward, then you are slowly, quietly becoming a version of yourself that is harder to fix tomorrow than it is to change today. You are not standing still. You are getting weaker. Every single day, you've heard every excuse. You've used them. You've believed them. You've repeated them enough times that they started to sound like truth. That you're tired, that you don't have time, that you need motivation, that maybe you're just not good enough, that maybe this isn't for you. But strip all of that away, and what's left is simple. You are not weak. You are not lacking ability. You are not missing something that everyone else has. You have just been too lenient with yourself, too willing to stop, too quick to justify quitting, too comfortable choosing the easier path. And that comfort has been costing you everything. Not in a dramatic, obvious way. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly. Every single day you chose not to act. Every time you told yourself later. Every time you stepped back when it got hard. Every time you listened to that voice that told you it was okay to stop. You weren't protecting yourself. You were holding yourself back. Because the truth is, nothing you want is on the easy side of your choices. Nothing meaningful comes from comfort. Nothing that builds you comes from avoiding difficulty. And yet, that's exactly what you've been doing, over and over again, while convincing yourself you just needed the right moment to change. There is no right moment. There is only a decision. And you've been delaying it. You've been waiting for clarity, for energy, for confidence, for motivation, when in reality, none of those things are required to begin. They come after. They come from action, from movement, from doing the thing you keep avoiding. But you don't get them by thinking. You don't get them by planning. You don't get them by waiting. You get them by acting. Even when it's messy, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you don't feel ready, that's the line you keep refusing to cross. Because crossing it means you can't hide anymore. It means you can't rely on excuses. It means you can't blame your circumstances, your feelings, or your situation. It forces you to face the only thing that actually determines your progress, your behavior. Not what you say, not what you intend, not what you hope will happen, what you actually do. And right now, your actions are not aligned with the life you say you want. That's the gap. That's the reason nothing has changed, and that gap will stay there, unchanged, unmoved, untouched, until you decide to close it. Not tomorrow. Not when things feel better. Not when you finally get motivated. Now. Because the version of you who keeps delaying is not going to suddenly become disciplined later. The habits you repeat today are the ones you carry into tomorrow. If you avoid now, you will avoid later. If you quit now, you will quit again. If you choose comfort today, you will choose comfort again when it matters most. So stop pretending that time will fix it. It won't. Time only amplifies what you do with it. And if what you're doing is nothing, then nothing is exactly what you'll get. This is where it changes. Not because you feel different, but because you decide to act differently. Starting today. Not in a dramatic, unrealistic way. Not by trying to be perfect, but by refusing to continue the same pattern. You don't need to do everything. You need to do something. When you don't feel like starting, start anyway. When your mind looks for excuses, cut it off. When the task feels imperfect, finish it anyway. Because perfection is another form of avoidance. Another way to delay. Another excuse to not move. And you don't need perfect. You need progress. Consistent. Uncomfortable. Real progress. The kind that comes from doing the work even when you don't want to. The kind that builds discipline instead of waiting for motivation. The kind that turns intention into action. That's what you've been missing. Not ability, not potential. Action. Repeat it enough times to become who you say you want to be. So make it simple. No more overthinking, no more waiting, no more excuses. From today, do it when you don't want to. Stop explaining why you can't. Finish what you start, even if it's not perfect. That's it. That's the shift. And if you can hold that line quietly, consistently, without needing validation, you will become something most people never reach. Not louder, not more motivated, but more dangerous. Because discipline doesn't need to be seen, it doesn't need to be announced, it doesn't need to be proven to anyone else. It shows up in what you do when no one is watching. It builds in silence, and over time, it turns you into someone who cannot be ignored. So stop talking, stop waiting, stop negotiating with yourself, and start acting, quietly, relentlessly, every single day. Because in the end, it was never about being weak. It was about being too easy on yourself. And the moment you remove that, everything changes. Discipline in silence, and become someone they can't compete with.